Welcome everybody to our DevSecOps webinar. We'll be talking some really interesting topics. We did quite a bit of research and put the content together for all of you. So this is relating to around looking at the top 10 AWS best practices for security and compliance. And just a short overview of Cloud Gnosis. What we do here is that we have a SaaS platform that delivers security and compliance solutions for the AWS user base. And we also have a complete set of API libraries, which DevSecOps folks use to insert in their pipeline to basically improve their process. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off. Welcome everybody once again, for those of you just joining in. Okay, so my name is Amit Khan, and I'm the AWS Partner Manager and Strategic Sales. And also with me, I have here Faisal Jawad, who's the Director of Product Management for Security and Compliance, and he'll be covering the technical top 10 best practices that are very specific. I'll go ahead and kick off the overall strategy and overall process for DevSecOps. So let me kick this off. So what you're going to learn today is overview of the DevOps and DevSecOps challenges. So we're going to kind of define the DevOps flow. We're going to talk about the SecOps specifically and the challenges around that. It's important us to know the challenges so we can kind of have a framework to work with. And then we're going to get into adding security in your CI/CD flows, exactly what those security points are and what you should be doing in your flows. And then we're going to go ahead and talk about how we can adhere to compliance. So there's some specific things that you need to do for that. And then overall, just kind of discuss the closed loop security and compliance process for DevOps. And then we'll dive into the top 10 AWS best practices for security and compliance. Faisal is going to cover those. And again, those are technical controls that are relevant for both security and compliance process. And then just a short 3-4 minute overview of our platform at the very tail end. We're going to do that. And again, the entire content is focused around our thought leadership and how we see DevSecOps overall in the marketplace as a whole. Okay, so let's just dive in, start with a big picture. So by 2020, Gartner is saying that 60% of digital businesses will suffer major service failure due to IT security teams' inability to manage digital risks. Now I know it says IT security team, and quite frankly, in our opinion, which you'll see very shortly in the next slide, it's everybody. So everybody has to contribute towards this success or potential failure. So we're going to kind of dive into that. So it's important to understand a big picture, and I'm sure many of you guys know quite a bit of this data, but I kind of want to bring this up to the forefront to understand that what we're working with. Okay, so this specific area really gets into the definition of DevSecOps, and again, definition is pretty basic, pretty straightforward. That you have development, operations, InfoSec, and QA all working together, in a cycle from planning to coding to building to testing and releasing and deploying and operating, and then a continuous improvement flow all around. So, and again, here you have 4 key points that are really homing in on we all need to work together. That's one of the key themes that we see in mature organizations. So agile development dictates speed, right? So speed means they need to keep going and deliver code very quickly, which means downstream processes such as IT managed infrastructure, they also need to keep up with that speed as well. And of course, security needs to come along the way, and making sure that that not only they keep up with the speed, but they also deliver continuous value in this cycle and chain that we're seeing here. And again, this is just a very high level beginning. We're going to drill down into each areas. We're going to drill down specifically how and where AWS security is relevant, and overall relevant in the overall automating the SSDLC process. So the last point is, automation is needed to achieve speed and scale. But at the end of the day, it's the first thing is culture. It's all about working together and starting together as one team. So let's take a look at the top 10 challenges that we see, and these are things that we have heard from working with different teams, and it's important to kind of bubble up to the top that I'm confident that these are some of the things that you're seeing also in your organizations as well. So let's go ahead real quick. There's not enough security and compliant guys in any company. And we've heard this over and over again, whether you have a team of 5 programmers or you have a development staff of 3,000, at the end of the day, either there's not enough security expertise available on hand because of talent shortage, or that there's just not enough to go around and they're being pulled in different directions. Just recently, we were working with a pretty large company. They had one security person for every roughly about 110 to 120 developers. So you can imagine the tax that's being put on security. Number 2 is manual compliance checklist and IT audits is not helping us scale. So yeah, companies have great compliance checklists and they have security operation procedures, but it's not going to help you reach scale. So scale means if you have more than 5, 10, 20 developers, it's going to become very challenging to do things the old-fashioned way. Number 3 is can't keep up with automated deployment without security automation. We have heard this many times where people are saying that we just can't do this manually. We have to keep up with the automated development process because Agile is all about automation. It's all about doing things in short sprints and quickly getting code out the door. And of course, you can't keep up with that unless you have security automation. Number 4, cloud agility is overwhelming for security and compliance due to manual process. Now, cloud brings another set of major complexities in terms of speed and new technologies and new process. And certainly that agility is putting a lot of pressure on security and compliance to keep up with the manual processes that are in place. Again, you see the word manual kind of repeated, and you should be homing in on this as a major theme that what you need to do to improve your process. Tracking configuration manually is not possible anymore. Okay, so and again, this is something that goes on today, and that's, by the way, number 5 is one of the major reasons why organizations are having breach. Not that they don't have great processes in place, they're just not tracking changes through automation versus doing it manually, right? So we're going to talk about this a little bit more later on. Number 6, agility dictates place control in developers' hands. Now, if on this call, if you're a developer or a development organization, you must be happy hearing this. But if you're in a security and compliance team, you must be saying, no, that's not true. We need to have control. Actually, the control is in the hand of developers. Why? Because they're the one who needs to meet business specific deadlines that are driven by their business to create the new functionality, to get to market faster and deliver this new innovation. Security and compliance just needs to catch up, as fast as possible. And again, keep in mind that I'm in security, so I'm saying that wholeheartedly that is the right statement. It is absolutely valid. If you want to achieve success, you need to give power and control to the developers. Okay, number 7, can't use old technology, old tools for the cloud. This is something that we see often where people struggle with, or that they don't have any tools for the cloud. So that's another thing that comes up. Number 8, lack of joint collaboration and trust between security and DevOps. This is actually a big one and this is where I started out. For those of you that are joining late, this is where I started out in my slide number 1, is that you got to have a collaborative process. DevOps is not just one person, one developer, or one department, or a bunch of guys doing some administration work on the back end. It's everybody. It's everybody and everybody in the value chain. Everything from planning to actual going to production and monitoring. It's everyone in that flow. Number nine, need a total transformation to achieve escape velocity. And these are fancy words. What it's saying is that, you know, we have great people, great talent, but we're just not delivering. And that's because we need to transform the way we do our business. And of course, this is a first step in this webinar that you guys are here in understanding that and moving forward with it. Security is an afterthought. I know many not so mature organizations, even in some mature organizations, have seen that, yeah, well, we'll toss it over the wall. These guys can run pen tests and then they can do whatever they want to do. That's a no-no, and we're going to talk about that in the slides coming up. Okay, so all of this is becoming very important to you and to your organization. And why is that? Not because you had a recent breach or that the boss is telling you to, hey, we need to improve security in our operations. Yes, all of that true, but really the main reason is that right now in any organization that we walk into, there's an innovation explosion going on. There's an IT transformation because of the cloud, because of Agile and Scrum is on the rise, and DevOps needs to catch up with that. There's a lot of workloads migrating to the cloud, and of course, there's a lack of talent because talent is moving out to cool cloud-centric companies. So they want to improve their skills and they want to go to companies that are innovating. And of course, there's a lot of push in larger companies that I've seen where they're not embracing startup tools, tools that are developed for the cloud by startups, because especially in the security side, because they feel that, well, it's not mature enough and we're not ready for it. So, using something is better than not using something at all or waiting for some maturity process to take place. And of course, it is a lot cheaper, 10, 30 times cheaper to fix things early on in the development flow for security than reaching production and doing pen testing and finding out that you have all these security holes. So that's important. Public microservices, containers, and API growth. That's definitely that's on a major rise, and that requires yet another set of security layering that needs to take place in your DevSecOps flows, and we're going to talk about that graphically with some charts. And then net landscape is becoming pretty competitive because we're a global economy, so we're getting competition from everywhere, and we need to keep up. There is the concept of zero trust model, no perimeter. Segmentation is very popular now, especially on the cloud. And pressure to deliver source code to production is faster than ever. Okay. So again, all these things are important. That's why you're here, and we're going to dive in to the very first thing. The very first concept that we're going to talk about is security as Word doc or code. Okay. Historically, in fact, before I kick this off, what I'd like to do is take a quick poll from the audience while I'm talking. So what I like to do is just to kind of find out, are you using security and compliance code process automation in your flow? So that poll should be on your right-hand side in front of you. If you can just please tell us that, are you using code automation in your process? So I see lots of no's right now, and it's being balanced out. So that's important to understand that you need to start thinking about new ways, old ways of having security operations, process and procedures in documents. And yes, these are living documents, but they're not very living. It's very hard to pull them, look at them, and figure out what do we need to do. So in reality, that's where the cloud and DevOps is moving towards, everything as code. So I'll go ahead and publish. I'll go ahead and end the poll, and you guys can look at the results yourself. And I'll go ahead and repeat the results, for those later on that will be listening to this. So I had four options. How are you using the code automation in your process? So 0%, very, yes, very mature. None of you said that you have a mature process. 22% said they started the process recently, and 22% that no, we don't have anything in place, and 56% said don't know. So surprisingly, 22 and 22 is an even number between yes and no, sort of. So I'll just guesstimate that 50% of you have started the process, and 50% of you have not started the process. So that's a reasonably good indication that telling us that industry's finally catching on in doing things different way. Okay, so next slide. When we say security as code or compliance as code, especially with AWS, what we're talking about is a system of always on. And really, there's a lot of benefit to that. Where I mean, AWS provides a nice programmable infrastructure, right? But you have to program it, or you have to license technologies, usually from young startup companies that are providing programmable libraries, that are providing automation tools that can help you maintain a library of these security as code, and they also provide their own best practices. So benefits are, of course, it's automated, repeatable. You can audit, and it's easy to iterate as well. Just sample forms of code are access policy documents that are there from AWS. You can look at their attestations to cloud formation templates. That's a big one. That's a really big one because that defines your infrastructure pieces in detail and so on. And of course, then they also provide the CLI, custom APIs, and Ruby scripts. All of those that are used to create security as code testing procedures. For example, hey, I want to test, is multi-factor authentication is turned on for all the console access? Yes or no? And again, that's a test control, and that should be running really hourly, daily, depending on how fast your cloud infrastructure is moving. Okay, so I'm going to talk about three challenges that's really going to nail it down, where you can really home in on what you need to do as a next step, right? So challenge number one is security culture has to change. Okay, for DevSecOps to be successful, the culture in the organization has to change. So the first thing is that you got to work together as one team, right? So integrate your cross-functional team, and you got to take some baby steps and walk, which means deliver some value in short sprints. Maybe you build some few automations. Maybe let's say you build 5 security checks, through code. That's a great win. Of course, then collaboration is key. That's part of your working closely with your cross-functional team, and automate. If you want to build and deliver a true mature process and repeatable process, then you need to consider security as code service model. So that should be your model moving forward. Challenge number two has to do with automation. Automation is key in the new economy, and that is the currency that's going to have tremendous value if you take this to your heart. Okay, it does require a little bit of a paradigm shift of thinking, but this is the new game. So make automation a core principle of your security plan. And of course, you can start with the basic use of cloud formation templates that AWS provides that can really get you organized on exactly what the infrastructure is going to look like, what the network access control list is going to look like, and so on. Use a code repository, which I'm sure you're doing that right now. GitHub is a great choice, but there's so many others now that you can use. And building a CI/CD process, continuous integration, continuous development process, is an ongoing process, and it honestly is custom to any organization that we walk into. And we're going to talk about some platforms that you can use to improve on this, but net, it is a custom process. Now, one thing here, which is in a bold and star, run AWS CIS benchmarks. I'm going to cover that in 2 slides over, but there's a link on the bottom. You can actually, if you're not aware of the AWS CIS benchmark, you should get to know that. And again, I'm going to cover that in the next slide, what that is in more detail. Challenge number 3, the last set of challenge, is to need to focus on visibility. So again, it's got to be repeatable, it's got to be continuous, and it's got to be visible. Those are the 3 things that you got to deliver on your promise. which means CloudTrail is enabled by default for all accounts. And again, that's one of those 10 top 10 best practices that Facebook is going to work on after, just after I'm done. So I don't want to steal the thunder away. So track configuration drifts, that's a big one. And of course, you have to analyze the VPC and CloudTrail and DNS logs. And AWS actually released a very cool product at the reInvent in December last year. While I was there, Guard Duty. It's a very, very interesting. You just turn it on, and that's it. It kind of works on its own. So do take a look at that. And it's very reasonably priced. It's quite honestly practically free for what it does. Okay, so again, visibility is important. After you have everything launched, you got to know how the things are running, so you can track all the changes and identify any vulnerabilities. Okay, so I said I was going to talk about the CIS AWS benchmarks. Um, and again, if you are not aware of this, this is the first thing you should be doing for your AWS environment because it's something that's free. It's available. You just Google CIS AWS benchmarks. You're going to get to Center for Internet Security link. There's a PDF file with 160 pages. So it's going to list out all of these controls. These are some of the controls that you see here. Everything from unauthorized API calls to basically disabling key management, S3 bucket policy changes. That's a big one in terms of hacks nowadays, right now, where people are not keeping track of their buckets accordingly and keeping it open by mistake. So all of these changes in tracking and more, that's something now you have to go do it manually or write policies in CLI or scripts, or you can license a product to be able to do all of these things. So, of course, Cloud Gnosis provides such a product that does all this, and we're going to cover that at the tail end for a few minutes, so you can take a look at it, how that works. Okay, so DevOps Lifecycle with security, what does it look like? And again, we wanted to keep things simple and to the point, and things that you can actually do and make it work and make it successful for your environment. So typical flow, you're planning, coding, testing, QA, release. You finally go into deploy, operate, and monitor mode. So these are different points. And dev and ops, there are some cutoff points. But security generally in this flow has been at the tail end. When you're getting ready to deploy, that's when people are doing pen testing. Well, prior to pen testing, you need to come up here in the code and test process and start doing what is called static code analysis and dynamic code analysis, and looking at the OS, vulnerability reviews. So you're developing on a stack, and you got to look at those version levels of those stacks and look at published vulnerabilities. And if there are some, then you need to patch them right away. Security can definitely help you with that, but you should be taking that step yourself personally to make that happen. Same thing with your source code. There are source code analyzers where they can scan and tell you cross-scripting and potential SQL injection issues and things like that can identify, you can fix. And of course, once the code is built, it's on let's say a web server, you want to do pen testing directly as well. There are some great open source tools there as well, so you don't have to. I mean, it's always nice to invest, a COTS product, commercial off-the-shelf product. White Hat and HP Fortified, those are two great solutions out there. CIS is free. You can go ahead and look at the OS vulnerability reviews online. And of course, good principles around change management, revision control are very important aspects of security. Making sure that what goes into production, you can trace back and know what's in production. At the tail end, around the operations side, there's definitely pen testing involved, which security or even dev teams can do together. So you have to do things like harden image, AMIs. AMI stands for Amazon Machine Image. Cloud formation, again, cloud formation and cloud formation templates. These are templates that defines your infrastructure in fairly detail. So that's important to keep track of. You absolutely have to run CIS benchmark scans. If you're not doing that, then definitely you have potential vulnerabilities in your AWS accounts. So you can take a look at that more closely, and look at pass fail events for that. Whether the ports are open, whether the routes access is enabled, and again, Faisal is going to cover that in more detail. Of course, monitoring logs, configs, drifts we talked about. IAM rules are big in AWS world. I mean, they're practically that's your gateway to your backend tools. And of course, security as code library automation. So that's something, a principle that needs to be invested in more and more and build on top of that. And again, there's some great tools and technologies and even open source products available out there that can help you do that. And of course, trusted registries and repos. So again, those are all part of the best practices around creating this DevSecOps flow. Okay, so let's talk about some tools and technology type stuff. What's available out there, what you guys can use. And again, we're not really promoting any product here. We're just saying this is what we see as that kind of bubbles up to the top. But you're certainly open to look at lots of open source stuff that's out there. On the top, you have all the AWS tools that can help you do code commits. So, for example, you can do a Git pull from the Git into AWS, and it can walk you through the code commit process and pipelining and building and deploying. Very good tools, actually very low cost tools. And also you have commercial tools on the bottom, which works with all of these products. So Chef, Puppet, Jenkins, of course GitHub as well. They all work together. What's right for you is something that you have to look at maturity wise, and how fast is your development flow, and there's all these pluses and minuses in all of these products, of course, and that's something that you can look at. We inject into all of these flows at Cognosis. We have API libraries that connect to all of them, so we can certainly discuss with you offline with that. Okay, so graphically, flowchart. Everybody loves pictures, and so do I. So let's talk about from code to monitor, and what are some of the tools that goes in the flow line, in the swim lane, and what can we do from a security points along the way. So I did create that list earlier, but this is kind of like a short, high-level view. So again, I talked about the specific AWS tools that are available. I'm not showing the Jenkins flows, the Puppet, Chef, and Ansible and Salt, all these flows, but they work directly in line with this. So code, for example, you can scan for secrets. Now, secrets meaning that secret keys, enabled keys. You'd be amazed how many times developers leave an AWS key in there, and some hacker gets in and find that key. You should be tagging your artifacts for security and compliance. So if you have things that are HIPAA specific or GDPR specific and so on, you should be tagging those things as part of your flow. And of course, you have to look at standards. So PCI, HIPAA, frameworks, that you have to look at, whether you comply with that or not. That comes in as part of your security as code, compliance as code process. And then, of course, looking at different components, for security in this cloud formation process. So that's one of the key things they should be keeping an eye on. And just monitoring at the tail end. Now, monitoring also includes running security as code test every hour on the hour. So in the new world, it's not just, hey, we passed PCI or HIPAA, we're good. No, you have to pass in PCI HIPAA every hour on the hour. So that's really what the new economy is all about. Okay, so continuous security and compliance. So here we're talking about building a system where we have heard all the challenges. We've heard what the flow should be. At the end of the day, you should be looking at automation, and it should be continuous, meaning it's working all the time, and it should be visible to you, and it should be always on. So we're talking about leveraging the new cloud technologies. We're talking about leveraging new agile methods and tools that we talked to you about in the past slide. and looking at security and compliance as code as the new norm. And that's what is going to deliver this maturity of flow that we're talking about. So with that, what I'm going to do is ask Faisal to take over from here and start talking about the IAM flow.
AWS signs up for an AWS account, and many people regularly use root accounts to do day-to-day tasks like administration and key many other access key ID and information things. But using the root key is an issue because the root account has access to all aspects of the AWS account, and if let's say the credentials or access or the API keys are lost in any form that they might be, we're basically giving all of your rights and access to somebody else. And by limiting the use of this root account, what the security benefits that are that we can give specific administrative level privileges to other accounts and not having to recover your account. We definitely recommend updating your information in case these root accounts are compromised. Number two is, as we've said, the identity and access management, using that very effectively to give permissions to users that need them. Many accounts that are created have broad access to many services that users do not need, and the drawback of that is very apparent. And AWS gives you a very, very strong granular control of customer accounts, and it can help you enforce stronger passwords. And you can definitely, when you're evaluating things with third-party applications and clients, you should definitely make sure that access to your AWS account is very, very limited, and you're aware of who you're giving access to. So, continuing with the identity and access management, a very good way of securing yourself from stolen credentials is definitely multi-factor authentication. A very effective way is using software tokens like the Google Authenticator and Authy and all of these applications that help that are integrated by AWS into their account. And you can definitely safeguard your accounts from access. Even if your credentials are stolen, we definitely recommend that multi-factor authentication be enabled for all AWS accounts, even the root account. So one of the granular things in AWS is that you can definitely control each of your VPCs that you have with your machines. All of these machines basically are connected via VPC, and these VPCs are basically segmenting your network. All of this elastic load balancing, RDS, elastic caches, and all of these things are controlled by your security groups. So many user accounts that we scan, we've seen that SSH port is enabled, or many management control ports like 3389 and VNC, and all of these ports are enabled for public access. And we've seen that these things are very important. And when you're managing your own AWS account, these are the key tools to leverage when you're maintaining security and compliance. We do not want our data to be leaked. We don't want management ports to be open to public ports, and this is something that we should all know. So implementing and using the AWS web application firewall will also help your application on top of these services. So this is something that we definitely recommend for you to look into and get into daily practice. Moving on, I think one of the major things when we're using EC2s, EC2 machine images, and Amazon basically gives you secure AMIs to use with. What we should be doing is, with the current climate and the current vulnerabilities that we've known about, the Spectre and the Meltdown, these machine images on Linux and everything should be updated. And we want to OS harden our AMIs, which we build our applications on top of. So, you should really spend time on securing your OS level, which your application runs on. Amazon gives you a good platform to run off, but you should know that what services that you've enabled on your AMIs, what users or what authentication mechanisms you have. So, spending time on these, on securing and creating an Amazon machine image will definitely benefit you in the long run. So one of the key things about compliance and security is obviously the security of our data. And a good practice is to encrypt your data when you're storing it on your storage. It could be your storage on your EC2 machines, or using the S3 buckets, or the RDS instances that Amazon provides you with, or any of these storages. We definitely need you to implement secure SSL. Basically, the latest version is the TLS 1.3, and all of data that you have is should be secure. There are many companies who focus on getting it out the door, but encrypting your data is something that you should spend time with, and you should make sure that you have recoverable keys, and using the KMS, key management service from AWS, is very important. So all of your data can be managed and kept securely. So encrypting your data at rest and in transit is very important for ever achieving any compliance or security objectives. So good thing that AWS provides you is CloudTrail, and CloudTrail gives you an event-by-event information of who or how your AWS account is being accessed. If we use the AWS CloudTrail and integrate it with CloudWatch, what we can do is we can create notifications on every access unauthorized on your AWS account. So since all of our infrastructure is now on AWS, we need to know what and how your AWS account is being accessed. So this is a very nifty mechanism. AWS has a blog on it, and we definitely recommend you to look through and set up your CloudWatch and your alarms and notifications with any activity that you think is very important for your AWS account. This will be very important going forward, and this is a very, very nice thing on AWS to use and to be aware on top of it. As we talked about earlier, there are many third parties that need access to your account. There might be because many of your business things need it, and just like Cloud Gnosis is a third party for you, and we will definitely log into your account and scan your resources. So the only mechanism that we recommend for you to use is the simple token service from AWS. What this service basically helps us do is it issues you a temporary token, and that temporary token is only valid for an hour. So like Cloud Gnosis integrates into your AWS account is by issuing a very temporary token, which is only which is time bound. These things that you should be using for every other third party vendor that you're integrating with. The only reason is because you don't know how they store their keys or how anything happens. So every time this you're giving access, you know for a fact that these things will not be stolen or used in maliciously. So the simple token service is something that is very cool, and you should be using for integrating for all your AWS third-party vendors. So S3 buckets have been notorious, and have been reported with lots of data leakages from AWS because of misconfiguration. And we definitely want you to audit your S3 buckets. S3 buckets have a permission where either they're open to public or open to all authenticated AWS users. So lots of companies store lots of data in this object storage, and we definitely want you to be on top of how your S3 buckets and how your data is managed. They might be secure, but giving open access to even encrypted data is just not a very smart thing to do. So Amazon Macy is a very nice service, which basically looks at if you have any customer identifiable data, and it basically helps you secure that. So you should turn on this service, and you should look into the benefits, because this is something that there's data leak prevention is something that is very necessary, and S3 buckets are very notorious for leaking all of the customers' data. So So when looking at compliance and security, right, we definitely would recommend you to get your network or your AWS infrastructure assessed by somebody that is not, from knowledgeable of your services. Because when looking from an attacker's perspective, you need to know that there are many issues there are from your network, and those might not be always apparent. So this is something that we would definitely recommend you to get it looked at. And would help you in your remediation and vulnerability scanning. So there's something that we won't talk about your top 10. There are many controls out there, but there are some things that you need to get done. And automation is something that will help you to keep your cloud compliant and secure. So I want to talk about our platform a bit so that you can get an overview look of it. We have an open trial, so you can basically use our product free of cost without any necessary obligations, and you can see how secure is your AWS account. So what we help in doing is we help you to continuously scan your AWS account. We give you alerts, we give you audit reports, and we help with remediation and all of these issues, and we support a few of the benchmarks so that maybe your data is important to one regulation or another. You can definitely scan and generate your reports and see where you stand. So all of our efforts have been towards benchmarking from popular controls and compliance methodologies, because when you're putting your data and creating your infrastructure on AWS, you don't exactly know if everything that you've built on top of AWS is compliant, and we help you get a step towards that. We help you generate reports. We have good dashboards, and we can drill down onto specific issues by region, by geolocation, and by overall risk. We help you create PDF reports so you can see where your issues are and how to remediate them, or see or monthly or daily audits that you want to perform on your systems. And we help you with compliance, and we give you geomap location where your issues might be. Many customers are using all of this in one region, but they're not aware that AWS by default is in all regions, and your other regions might need some security alerts or something. Our dashboards give you information on specific PCI and HIPAA and all of these issues, and an overall look on what your outlooks on security are. You want to know what assets you have in the cloud and what will be vulnerable. We give you an overall look on your attack surface. Many companies it's very important to them to understand if their risks are decreasing over time or they're increasing. So we have a health dashboard where we can map all of your issues per category and per region and see what your issues are, either improving or decreasing or getting worse. And on top of that, we have a nifty product as well where you can save cost by idling your EC2 instances. There are many production development systems that don't need to be on 24 hours, and we give you a very big cost savings because of our feature where you can snooze your machines and get them back up later on. So what we want to talk about today, obviously, is how security is important, how compliance can be automated, and how you can secure AWS accounts. We definitely recommend all of these things to you, and we want you to look into secure automation with continuous integration and deployment, and manage your AWS account very, very well. So open to any questions, I think, Emin.
Okay, thank you. That was great, fantastic. So definitely we wanted to kind of save time and get it done in 35 minutes. We're just a little bit over, that's okay. We definitely want to leave room for questions. So please go ahead and type your questions in the chat box and we can answer that for you. The one question there was on. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, so just one housekeeping that I did not mention earlier was that everybody who registered, you will be getting a copy of the presentation, and so certainly look for that. I think it takes about I guess a day or so to kind of get that out to you guys. So you'll get a recorded link, and you can take a look at that. And so I guess I'm just looking for some questions. Let's see. There is one question here. Okay, so how do you integrate into the DevOps CI/CD type of products like Chef, Puppet, Ansible, Salt? So net, our methodology is to provide continuous analysis, right, via insertion of checks along the CI/CD flows via the API access, and the integration will vary by a particular product, and it's also keep in mind that the access within every company that we implement, it is going to be different. Especially, most of you will have a custom SSDLC flow. So that's something going to vary from customer to customer. The best I could say is that we have a very robust API structure, and we have a set of libraries that you can make calls on to run those security as code tests that we're talking about. Okay, that was a good question. Okay, another one is, can this thing help discover or alert on DDoS attack? All right. So, rather than discovering the DDoS attack, we can tell if your AWS account is configured properly. For example, CloudWatch turned on, and so the attack is kind of limited just to the endpoints. And also, the other way we mitigate risk, we can check for is if you have auto scaling turned on or not, which is neat to combat, DDoS. AWS has a pretty good, structure around that. Okay. Question around, does your solution work on agents, and how does that work? No, we don't actually install any agent. We're an agentless SaaS platform. So you can very simply go ahead and just simply log on to our system, and with this secured token service, STS service that Faisal was talking about. So through the API layer, we pull all the metadata and pull all the machine data and perform machine analysis. And then from that, we basically apply the best practices, which are a set of rules that we have aside from CIS rules like HIPAA, PCI compliance rules. And we'll basically go ahead and grade and monitor and check for all the changes, everything from open ports to looking at S3 buckets to looking at the IAM policies and so on. Hopefully that answers that question. Okay, question on operating system hardening. Do you guys do that as part of your CIS checks? So good question. So our CIS checks, and that's important to understand, is we're doing CIS checks around infrastructure from the outside. We're not going inside the host and looking at the OS process in terms of version control. That's something that certainly you can do through 2 or 3 different products that AWS has. One is Inspector, and the other one is Advisor. So a combination of those two, you can manage that on your own, and also tools like Chef. They have what is called a compliance engine, which basically that's what it does. It does the operating system hardening checks, continuously. So again, in the future, we will be adding those capabilities in terms of pulling in with a complementary AWS product and pulling in those telemetry signals into our flow, so you can have visibility across the board through one process. But again, we're not trying to replicate any capability that already exists for you, either in your CI/CD flows of capability, or very simply in the within the AWS environment. Okay. All right. So let's see. I'm gonna skip that question. So there's a question around how long it takes to configure your system. Again, it's just 5 minutes. You can literally, open a trial, put in your IAM username, password in, and that's it. Within 5 minutes, you can have the reports in front of you. Okay, question around SQL injection. Can you detect SQL injection? So SQL injection is really around pen testing. So you should be running your own pen testing to be able to analyze and detect that. We don't actually do any pen testing. So the only thing we do around looking at SQL injections is really to make sure that AWS Web Application Firewall is turned on. So that's important, right? Because that product actually helps significantly in cutting down on cross scripting and also SQL injections. So that's one thing we kind of check for and make sure that you guys don't have that off, or maybe an attacker turned it off for you. So those are things that we can do. Question around S3 checks. Yes, we also do S3 checks for how the S3 buckets are being accessed, edited, deleted, and so on. We make sure that the versioning is turned on. Why that's important? Because a hacker can actually get in and delete or turn off the versioning, so they can do the changes, and then there's no way to trace back. So we have those functions. So good questions. I'm going to go ahead and kind of taper that off now. We try to keep our webinar to about 40, 45 minutes. We're at 15-minute mark. But again, it was a big topic. We covered quite a bit. So hopefully you guys will try out our capability that we have. And of course, interact with us. If anybody needs a copy of this presentation, I'll be more than happy to send that out. Last question I'll answer. Your pricing policy is based on AWS credentials. Is this different users? Okay, so no, is this different to users? No, so users, no. So if you have an account like AWS account, and you could have multiple users in there. So we're talking about a username and password that's getting into your AWS to access your machines. That's the account that we're talking about. There's also a RBAC capability within our solution. So let's say you have one login, you pull in 100 instances, and from those 100 instances, you want to create 5 teams under that, within our portal, and give access like 10 instances to each. Yes, you can do those kinds of things, within our platform very nicely, and you don't have to pay for it. And pricing is pretty reasonable. You guys can see it on the web. Volume pricing is around $100 per AWS account, which is pretty generous. And we give you all the reports, it's not just one report. Okay, all right. So thank you all. Thank you very much. And again, if you need the presentation that I have here, send a message to info@cloudgnosis.com. Thank you, and have a great day, and enjoy your day.